When I look at organizations from a boardroom investor or leadership perspective, I think one of the most common problems that we see is not really lack of ambition. Most organizations have plenty of ambition. They want to grow, they want to transform, they want to digitize, they want to expand into new markets and improve their margins, build resilience, deliver on their sustainability commitments and create long term value for not just their shareholders but their broader stakeholders. And of course, that ambition is very important and it matters. But desire and ambition is not a strategy. And this is where many organizations get into great difficulty. They confuse the language of strategy with the work of strategy. So they produce polished decks, impressive targets, long lists of initiatives, and very beautiful design dashboards. But when you look underneath, the real strategic choices are missing, which simply means that a goal is not a strategy. A tactic is not a strategy. A vision statement is not a strategy. A goal tells us what we want to achieve. A tactic tells us what activity we're going to undertake. But strategy should explain how we intend to get there. It should tell us where we will focus, what problem we are solving, what choices we are making, what trade-offs we are prepared to accept, and how well we will align our capital, our talent, our leadership attention, and organizational energy behind those choices. And that distinction matters enormously. If we look at the work, well, my professional work, and then also some of my academic work, specifically also if we look at some of the work that Said Business School has done around purpose and performance, it's very useful here because it reminds us that purpose sits at the foundation of the organization. Purpose is not simply a marketing line or a sentence in the annual report. The purpose should explain why organizations exists, what problems it's seeking to solve. And from there, values are shaped in how the organization behaves. Mission clarifies what the organization does, and vision points to the impact we want to create over time. But even then, purpose, values, mission, vision don't automatically create a strategy. They create direction, they create meaning, they create a frame for decision making to take place in, but they still need to translate into choices. And this is where I always find the work of Richard Rummelt so insightful. His work remains very, very powerful and actually very digestible and very easy to understand. And Rummelt warns us that bad strategy often comes dressed up as ambition. It uses language of aspiration. It sounds confident. It may even sound inspiring, but it avoids the hard work of diagnosis, choices, and coherent action. And this is a real leadership issue because saying we want to grow revenue by 20% is not a strategy. Saying we want to be a market leader is not a strategy. Saying we will launch 5 strategic initiatives is not a strategy. Those may be goals, they may be aspirations, they may be activities, but they don't yet explain how the organization will win, why it has the right to win, or what must change for ambition to become achievable. And in my experience, I think the best strategic conversations start with honesty. What are the real challenges we're facing? Why are we underperforming? Why is the market changing? Where do we have an advantage? Where are we exposed? What will we prioritize even when everything else feels very important? Those are the questions that move strategy from a slogan to real substance. And they are not always comfortable questions. This is why some organizations avoid them. It's easier to build a long list of initiatives than to make hard choices. It's easier to add another priority than to remove one. It's easier to say yes to every opportunity than to decide where the organization will genuinely focus. But strategy requires us to make those choices. And choices requires trade-offs. If everything is strategic, then nothing is strategic. And this is also why boards and executive teams have such an important role to play. Their responsibility is not simply to approve the strategy deck, but their responsibility is to test the quality of the thinking. What is the diagnosis? What is the assumptions we are making? What alternatives did we consider? What are the risks? What are we placing our bets on? What capabilities do we need? What capabilities do we have? How will we know if the strategy is working? And I think perhaps most importantly, does the strategy help the organization decide what to do or not? That for me is one of the clearest tests of strategy. A good strategy should guide decision making when leadership teams is not in the room. It should help people understand how their work connects to this bigger picture. It should help teams prioritize. It should help reduce noise. It should align resources, and it should bring coherence. Because without coherence, organizations drift into activity. They become busy but not very effective. They launch projects, but it doesn't build an advantage, doesn't build a capability. They track metrics, but it doesn't necessarily create value. They talk about transformation, but fail to change the underlying systems and policies and processes. So the question then is, I guess, how do we get this right? And I think at first it starts with purpose. Be clear about why the organization exists and what problem we are trying to solve for who. Secondly, is to clarify your values, your mission, your vision. How do we behave? What do we do? What impact do we want to create? And then from there is to set clear goals. Define what success really looks like and how we're going to measure that. Once we've done this, we can develop a coherent strategy to diagnose the real challenges, to make the choices, to focus the resources, and decide where to play and how to win. Just on those two terms about where to play and how to win, there's obviously a lot more to share, and I'll probably do that in a separate video. But this will not only move us to tactics, but the projects, the actions, the initiatives should flow from our strategy. It shouldn't be a substitution for that. And this is why this hierarchy in many organizations, they get that wrong. They start with the tactics and they jump straight into activity. And this movement is then mistaken for progress. But organizations that outperform are usually the ones that create alignment between purpose, strategy, and execution. They know why they exist. They know what they're trying to achieve. They know how they intend to compete or create value, and they know which actions matter most. So in a more volatile and more uncertain world, this discipline becomes very important. Leaders cannot afford strategy as theater. Investors cannot afford strategy as purely narrative without execution. Boards can't afford strategy as a compliance exercise, and organizations cannot afford to confuse ambition with advantage. A good strategy is not about sounding strategic. It's about making better choices. It's about focusing effort. It's about connecting purpose to priorities, priorities to resources, and resources to execution. And ultimately, it's about building an organization capable of delivering on its ambition. And that's where the real alignment across the enterprise really begins. I hope you found this insightful, and we'll talk soon.